Well, friends, we are at 72 hours past the school murders in Santa Fe, Texas. And I always follow the 72-hour rule before commenting. And I'll put a link to it. You can read it. I'll put a card up here to the 72-hour rule so that you can take a look at that. And I always wait 72 hours for several reasons, as I described in that video. But that 72 hours is up. And so now I think we have enough information, though it's incomplete, to talk about what happened, and most importantly for us, a path forward. I have a significant, I believe, path forward that we can follow that will significantly decrease murders like this. And I don't call them shooting sprees or whatever. They are what they are, a mass murder. And to decrease murders like this will be very difficult for us culturally, but I think we can do it. So let's talk about it. So first of all, of course, my heart goes out incredibly to the grieving families. I've been praying all weekend. You guys know I pastored a church for almost 15 years, and this kind of thing hits very close. The murders in Sutherland Springs, Texas, I actually had a family of extended church family who was there that day, and so these things hit very close to me. And that's one of the reasons we do the 72-hour rule, is to give us time to grieve and process and think. So let's think about the details here. A 17-year-old student at the school who apparently acted because of a spurned love interest and because people hated him, took in some capacity a Remington 870 shotgun, which is a incredibly common hunting model shotgun, and a 38 caliber revolver from his dad that his dad legally owned, walked into the school and apparently ambushed the school resource officer, and then had a 25-minute running battle with the police officers. Police officers, apparently from the news stories, were on scene in 10 minutes. He had 15 minutes of gun battles with them before he gave himself up, and he is currently in custody. In between the time that he ambushed the SRO and the police arrived and he was having a gun battle with them, he had about 10 minutes, and in that time he murdered 8 of his classmates and 2 of his teachers, 2 teachers at the school. We know that the total timeline here was probably almost 25 to 30 minutes long, and we know that the tools that he used, and so there are some lessons that we can learn. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about the tools that he likely used. One of the news stories that I've read says, well, they all say that it was a shotgun. One says a Remington 870. This is my personal Remington 870. It's an Express Super Magnum, so this is my turkey hunting gun. And could very well be very, very similar to what he used. And if you notice this is, not one of the rifles that's currently under significant scrutiny, but it is still a tool that can be misused. So you notice here that in the magazine tube in this particular model, now you can buy models that are a little shorter barrel and for home defense, and so it has a little longer magazine tube, but even in that one, you're not gonna load more than 5 shells in at a time, except for in very rare instances. So what that means is that he was running this gun and then reloading again and again and again. And so one of the things that we say is it's cyclic rate here. This is a pump action shotgun, so you again, if I look and the chamber's empty, and I pull the trigger and then I have to chamber another shell, and I can do that depending on how it's configured 3 to 5 times before I then have to flip the gun over and go get shotgun shells and feed them in into my shotgun before I can start over. This is not a fast way to be able to fire a lot of shells, but that didn't matter. He had 10 minutes before the police showed up of being able to wantonly murder as many as he wanted, and so this is just as deadly as any other tool. The other tool he was said to have is a 38 special revolver. Could very well have been something like this. Could have been a little bit larger, but this is a Smith & Wesson Airweight and 38 special. And so same thing, if I look here, what you have is you have 5 shots in the cylinder of this one. And so as many times as he goes bang, 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 and then he has to empty the revolver cylinder and then in all likelihood put them back in one at a time and close that and go to work. This is, by modern standards, not a fast gun to operate, and that was utterly irrelevant. Now, I say that to say, you're going to get a debate on both sides, and I'll probably make people a little bit frustrated on both sides in this, about, tools, and we got to have gun control and those kind of things. And I'm a pragmatist. I am a Second Amendment absolutist, but he used a hunting shotgun and a .38 special revolver. Friends, there isn't, those were made over 100 years ago. These are not weapons of war. These, one of the most popular hunting shotguns in America, and a revolver that's been carried, a .38 special revolver has been around for well over 100 years. So saying, we got to watch out for this particular kind of weapon because of its great deadliness, I do think that this massacre, unfortunately, graphically displays to us, because he has 10 minutes to reload, because he had so much time in order to wreak havoc and kill those who he wanted to kill, that reloading times and magazine size and all those things are utterly and completely irrelevant. So when we're having this debate at a national level, let's just get that off the table, because this murder shows us how irrelevant that is. I even saw one news story that they said that, it was a good thing he wasn't using something like an AR-15, and two things to that. Number one, how incredibly disrespectful to the families, how incredibly hurtful to them, because it's a political victory that he wasn't using a beleaguered or a demonized tool. How disrespectful to them for their lost loved ones. And number two, how utterly irrespective of what the actual facts of the matter are in terms of lethality and time. So, when we start talking about, what gun laws can we change? These two tools that were used and the amount of time that he had show us what the fallacy of that is to, I think, anyone who's thinking. Now, how did he get them? That's another question. We know at this point that they were his father's guns, and they were legally acquired by his father. How did he get them from his dad? I don't know. His parents seem to be utterly shocked by this. The little bit that I've heard from them in the news says they are utterly shocked by it as well. And so, I'm going to guess that his dad wasn't reckless. That's a guess at this point. But it does bring up one potential solution, and one thing that I just want to take a minute and talk to parents about safe storage and prevention of unauthorized access by minors to your firearms. Now, this comes to you from the perspective of a dad who has had children who are unauthorized accessors in his home. Now, I'm not just saying just regular kids, but in my life and in my world, I have had children with significant mental illness living in my home who have been a danger to themselves and even at times a danger to others. So don't hear me as somebody who's coming off callously, okay? I've looked in the eyes of a child who said that they wanted to hurt others, okay? And thankfully, because my wife and I are very proactive with this stuff, we were able to do that from inside of an inpatient facility. But my point is this, is that parents, you are responsible, or not just parents, but everyone responsible to prevent unauthorized access of your firearms. And friends, that means keeping them in the safe. That means keeping them in a quick access safe that your kids don't have the code to keep them out of the hands of kids who should not have them. Now, we can talk about the murderer's social media and were there warning signs and all that stuff. I'm not sure of those things yet. It seems like on some places social media is reporting that he definitely had some warning signs. So what I'm really saying here is that if you have a child that exhibits any danger of instability, of loss of ability to modulate their emotions and correctly and helpfully deal with their problems and stresses in life, then you have to be extremely over the top careful. And I get it that some of my gun loving folks are going to say, but John, my kids need to have guns in the house to defend themselves. And I'm just going to tell you, as parents, as folks who own firearms, we have to be incredibly careful to be able to very truly, not with rose-colored glasses, but actually look at our kids and say, is my child potentially a danger to themselves or a danger to others? And if they are potentially a danger to themselves or a danger to others, we have to be the ones who are responsible enough to lock the guns up in the safe and to say that the chance of my child having to defend themselves against a home invasion or an armed robber coming on our property, in their case, is probably less than them doing harm to themselves or others or inappropriately using the firearm. Parents, hear me, you have to keep unauthorized access of your firearms from happening. Now, as we talk about a path forward, I think that we have to recognize that I think there are two prongs that we have to really strongly pay attention to here. And so I think that they both need to be done. They both need to be significantly considered. Well, really three things. David French in the National Review wrote a fantastic article, and I will link it in the description, about how these things get easier as more people do them. That when one person does it, then that maybe means that there's somebody else out there that if someone else went first, they'll go second. But maybe someone's not willing to go second, but they'll go third. And we get to this place where they get seen again and again, and now we're in 5th, 6th, and 7th. And now we're seeing kids who are desensitized to the place where now they're trying to get a high score. Now they're trying to one-up the next one. And that's why we saw, things like incendiary devices and explosive devices that were duds, but whatever. And so one of the ways that we have to act, friends, hear me, I think one of the ways that we have to act is that we have to stop in any capacity showing the face and the name or glorifying in any capacity, even in shock and awe, those who commit these monstrous acts. Now, I'm going to say this from the perspective I think I've seen in the self-defense world as I have started to say, let's practice the 72-hour rule. I've started to see a good number of people pick that up. So I'm going to ask for one more thing. Number one, in the self-defense and firearms world in particular, I'm going to say never post the name, the face, the picture of a mass killer. Never give them the notoriety that they want. We know that the murderer in this instance, from the news stories, said that number one, he killed the kids who he had spurned him, particularly a young woman who he would not date him, and he spared the kids that he liked so that his story would be told. We have to deny them that, friends. We have to deny them their story being told and say, nope, you get absolutely no publicity. We will not post your face. We will not post your name. We will not give you any notoriety whatsoever. And I'm just going to encourage and ask, please, for us to start telling the journalists in our lives and journalism at large to start practicing this as our standard of care. Journalism did this not too long ago. Before, the last number of years, they would identify victims of sexual abuse and sexual assault. But if you look through all of mainstream media today, they will not identify victims of sexual abuse or sexual assault. That is a standard of journalistic care, that they will not identify those people. We can make that same thing. If the journalistic world agrees to it, we can say we will never mention the murderer's name. We will never put their face on national television. We can maybe give some details that this murderer had some things and let the powers that be and the authorities say, here's what's going on. But if the journalistic world said we will never mention them again, then that will take away a significant motivator to perpetrate these kinds of mass murders, and we just have to do it. So friends, I'm just telling you, number one, do that yourself. Never share face, name, or description of a mass killer on your social media or whatever, your email or anything like that. And encourage everyone in the mainstream media and in media in general to do the same. And if we all will accept that standard, that will create a significant disincentive for these kind of incidents. Number two, I think that the school resource officers are great, and this school had 2 school resource officers. But it looks to me like he either targeted the SRO in the beginning, or because he was able to see the SRO, a uniformed officer, he was able to engage that officer who was shot through both arms and was rendered unable to effectively stop the threat. And I think one of his fellow officers put tourniquets on him and saved his life, and that's fantastic. But the reality is, when you have a uniformed police officer on campus even, that is a target. And what we're going to start seeing is we're going to see these murderers who target the SRO first so that it gives them time. So they're going to ambush the SRO. And I don't know exactly if that went down that way today, this particular one, but I know it's an issue. So what that means is, to have an effective armed response on campus, it has to be a concealed effective response, a concealed armed response on campus. I am not for arming all teachers. I do not think all teachers have the emotional wherewithal. They do not have the attitude, the skills, and the plan in order to be armed. But if we implemented nationwide a policy like the FAA's armed pilot program that allowed selected, chosen people who said, I will carry, so a pilot who says, yes, I will go through the training, I will do it on my off time, I will get the requisite skill set to be able to carry a firearm on a domestic airline in the United States, they can carry. The same thing with teachers. We create a standard that says, listen, I will carry, I will be responsible, and I know dozens, hundreds of teachers who would go through a significant amount of training, maybe in their summertime or whatever, to keep a firearm on their person. There are already districts that allow this, and that concealed, hidden, armed presence is a deterrent in those districts. And I think if we absolutely made that nationwide, that also would be a deterrent, because again, these potential murderers would not know where the armed response comes from. Now, of course, as a father of mentally ill kids and somebody who has dealt with mental illness on a very personal level many times, I do think another solution, something we have to consider, is a complete revamping of our mental health care system in America. Destigmatizing mental illness, getting kids the help they need, making sure that we get interventions in place, and that when we identify a potential offender, somebody who could potentially harm others, that we intervene early, often, and big in order to head off these problems. And I do think our law enforcement, and I do think that our counseling services across the nation do the best they can. But we need to really take a different look at this and really invest the time and the resources and the attention that we need to help head these kids off at the pass, so that we don't keep having these discussions. And friends, I think that's the path forward. It's not gun control. Again, if we could have something that would make a meaningful difference, that would significantly alter the course of these kinds of events in terms of, hardware, I'd consider it. I'm an absolutist, but I'd consider it for the sake of my family. I have kids in public schools here in Arizona, so I get it, but it's not going to. And so as a pragmatist, I'm just like, let's not focus on the things that won't help. Let's focus on the things that will. So I think those things would help us. And so help me get the word out about not naming the murderers in any capacity, about talking with our legislators about actually protecting our kids with a concealed armed response, so that they can not know where the armed response might come from. And then let's start having the discussion on completely revamping our mental health system, so that we can make progress and get better at this, so I don't have to keep coming here on the Active Self-Protection Extra channel and having these discussions. As always, friends, let's have a civil discussion. If you want to leave a comment and keep discussing it, I'm all game. But let's make sure that we stay professional and kind and empathetic, because this is already a contentious enough topic. God bless you.